there is this part of me that's like, oh, but you'll still be a filmmaker one day. And I'm like, maybe I will, but maybe I have to kill the part of me that would be okay sacrificing everything for just to make a movie.
You are listening to Fruitless, a podcast hosted by me, Josiah Sutton. This is episode 11, You Are Not the Chosen One, featuring Phil Cozzi.
You lost one of your AirPods?
It's been 2 years now since I got them, or maybe even 3 years.
This is embarrassing, but
and I have done so good not losing it, and then I did it.
You know how I work at Panera Bread?
Yeah. Have you
One
lost
day-
AirPods there?
Worse. So, one day I was working. I work the QC station. They basically treat me like a pseudo manager, and I'm usually always that position because I'm the fastest at it. And that essentially means putting orders together. Mostly my job is also hopping between the lines and making things, so I basically just do everything. So, saying that my job is anything that's just usually where I'm standing. And the soups are underneath me. So one day, I was fiddling with one of my AirPods while doling out soup. And, wouldn't you know, one of them popped off and fell directly into the fucking broccoli cheddar. And I'm just like, trying to serve a customer, like, normally. In, like, my horrible depressed malaise of, like, fucking servitude and my customer service voice. I'm just, like, trying to, like... So I had... And that shit's, like fucking lava. Like, I would burn myself if
you stuck your hand in there.
If I stuck my... And I burn myself all the time, but I would scald my entire hand if I tried to fish it out with anything.
Right.
And so
right.
I'm just, like, fishing around in there with the ladle, and, like, dumping... Just, like, absolutely, like, cups of it, and then fishing through the cup with, like, a fork until I find it. And I cleaned it up, and it still worked.
Hey, there you go.
So...
My thing that pisses me off about my missing AirPod is that... So I lose it in a stupid way, but it's just... So I struggle to fall asleep without, like, listening to something. And so... I fall asleep with my AirPods in, like, all the time.
Just listening to Neil Sarega edits? Just, like,
And I've been told when I do that in the middle of the night I take them out and just set them on the bed. Which is bad, but I don't know how to not do that. And I've, like, quote-unquote lost them numerous times and then just, like, found them,
That's insanely interesting that you just don't remember them.
I apparently do it in the middle of my sleep. But then there was a morning the other morning that I could not find the other one. And I tore apart the bed. I have no idea where it is. So I'm one AirPod down. So that is a long way of communicating why I have been having technical issues when I record with Bluetooth devices. And Welcome to Fruitless, everybody.
Welcome to Fruitless. I don't say welcome to Fruitless. I say welcome to Mammonburg, like, every week.
Yep,
so.
You're about to say, So welcome Fruitless. It's been a month and a half off, I think, something like that. And I want to get back into making Fruitless episodes, so I'm easing back in, getting somebody on who I'm comfortable chatting with. That's right. It is my fellow co-host from Mammonburg, Phil Cozzi? Can I say your last name?
Yeah, you can say my last name.
Okay,
I have no shame.
Philip Cozzi. Yeah. Philip Cozzi himself. And the topic I gave him, I doubt we'll even fully stick to, and it's vague enough as is, was just, Phil and I talk about movies a lot. Phil's a big film guy. And so I just wanted to talk about movies, and I'm assuming we'll take that in weird directions.
I like weird directions, though. I kind of want to start off
usual.
with my own relationship to movies. Like, I think we should start off with it.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say, what I usually do is give an elevator pitch. Who are you, and all that, and that could be that. So introduce yourself, and through that, tell us your story with the art form known as cinema.
So my journey to liking film, it's a complicated thing because I wanted to be a filmmaker for so long, and I still do. But it's just the issue of just like trying to maneuver it in the modern industry. So I started out an idealistic, young, plucky high schooler, and there was just never anything I wanted to really do in high school. Like, English class was my favorite thing. That was the thing I was good at. And I liked stories, but I usually liked when people put on a movie. Just growing up as a kid, I was just like, when I was younger, academically, I was just very bad at school. I'm better at school now. Like, I don't know why I'm better at school now, but I guess when you're in your mid-20s...
Because you care more.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but I feel like when you hit your mid-20s, your brain actually does fully develop. Or at least is close to fully develop. I think it finishes developing in your 30s. Like, at the end, like the beginning of your 30s. So, like, my brain is still, like, you know, I'm finally in a place where, and I was a late bloomer, too, so it took me a while to do things that were, like, for example, I just got my license, so it took me a while to do a lot of things that normal people, quote-unquote normal people, do at younger ages. So it took me a really long time. So, I don't know, so it started when I was in high school, my fascination with movies, because, obviously, I went through an insufferable phase where I was like, damn, there's, like, not many good movies. Like, I don't know, for a long time, I was like, geez, like, every time I watched a movie, I would be like, when I was a kid, Transformers movies were fun to me, because, like, I think everybody has a cultural exposure to movies, you know what I mean? You get a cultural exposure to, like, American cinema, but American cinema is, like, Transformers, the Marvel films, you know... Especially since they were coming out as I was growing up, most of, like, Phase 1 shit. So,
yeah, which is, you know, not to get too far to that, but that's also the better, in my opinion, the better era of Marvel. Like, I think Iron
Captain
Man
America, the first one, is a competent movie.
Yeah.
Like, the Phase 1s were more, like, actually defined films and less of, like, a content slurry.
Yeah. Less of this, like, self-referential metaverse stuff. Yeah, for sure.
So, you know, you get a cultural... I feel like a lot of kids get a cultural exposure to movies, but they don't get a cultural exposure to film. Which is me parroting Martin Scorsese, which everyone calls him pedantic for, creating, like, basically a difference between film and entertainment. So I think one of the first... so this is embarrassing, but I'm gonna say it anyway. I was a nostalgia critic fan.
Okay, yeah.
When I was a kid. I think everybody is a nostalgia critic fan at one point if you're seriously into movies and you're my age. You were a nostalgia critic fan at one point. The caveat is that you eventually realized that film criticism is actually far better than that. And then you just ignored anything he ever had to say about movies for the rest of your life. But he did make a good recommendation. So one of the first art films I ever watched, like, my uncle bought me, I asked for it for, like, Christmas, was like, he recommended Citizen Kane, the Nostalgia Critic. It's like one of his favorite movies.
Yeah.
So I watched it and I was like, wow, Citizen Kane is a very good movie. And then
breaking news, everybody.
Yeah,
Citizen Kane, good movie.
Good movie. And then and then one of the subsequent films that I think is still, it's not one of my favorite films ever made, but it's one of the films I come back to and I'm like, never again will there be a movie this visually stunning in this specific way. And that movie is Terry Gilliam's Brazil, which was also recommended to me by the Nostalgia Critic. And I think no other movie could be Terry Gilliam's Brazil, because there's no movie that looks like it. There's no movie that has that, like, level of design, like a design that is wholly its own. Like, there are movies that obviously have their own design, but Terry Gilliam's like specific art style that he goes for in Brazil, the set design, you know, every kind of like manufactured piece of it, that really struck me when I was like 16, 17. Like, that was so impressive to me.
You know, it's something embarrassing. I've never actually seen Brazil.
It's a good movie. It's kind of what's weird about Brazil is the nostalgia critic is like the epitome of a broken clock being right twice a day. Is that he'll recommend on occasion a good art film, and then you'll realize that like he recommended it because he has no idea why he likes it, but he just knows that he likes it,
or that it's like, I don't know, maybe this isn't true with Nostalgia Critic, but with a lot of people, it's they recommend it because this is a movie that is recognized as a great movie, and so that's like kind of their like their connection to it mostly. But yeah, my Terry Gilliam relationship is entirely off Monty Python and then Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That was basically my relationship with him as a kid.
He's a very hit or miss director, I feel, but like that's kind of besides the point. Like I started one of the first big like art house films I really, really liked was like Birdman. Mm-hmm. I remember being enamored with Birdman when I saw it for the first time. So that really like, and I think that's, for all of its criticisms, it's a very unique and a very good film that I feel like has been forgotten way too quickly. I feel like I never hear anyone talk about it, but that's also like the current state of film media, is that you just never hear people talking about the good movies. Like, they happen for 1 month and then just disappear into the ether. But essentially, to me, what was crazy about that was just, I don't know, like, I think there's a juxtaposition for me, where there was that moment where I was like, movies can be so much more than whatever the fuck I grew up watching. Because, every once in a while as a kid, you watch one of those, like, culturally accepted movies that are good, like Jaws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Most Steven Spielberg stuff. Like, you watch a movie that most people like, and it's in the canon of American film, and it's not on the outside of the canon of American film. You never get to see like a John Waters movie. That's never introduced to you. But you're able to see. Maybe you'll get a Pulp Fiction every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, I was, I think lucky enough, my dad was a big Coen Brothers fan. And so, I have a lot of like, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is really deep in my brain as like but I don't think that's true with a lot of people. Yeah.
It's a hard experience because most people in America, I think the state of the American film industry in the last 30 years have kind of defined what an entire generation of people kind of think movies are versus what movies actually are and can be. You know what I mean? There's that horrible rift, It's why I always hate that, like, the innocuous statement, films are just entertainment. They're supposed to be entertaining. And I'm like, no, they're not supposed to just be entertaining. What does entertainment mean? And then you go into this whole rabbit hole where you get really angry and clenched, and you're just like, well, what does it mean to be entertaining? Is a horror movie entertaining? Are you sitting there enjoying it the whole time? No, you're supposed to be scared. They're supposed to elicit different emotions. Screw you. And then, like,
Yeah, sure.
But I was really like aggressive about movies when I was younger, because like you don't grow into that, like, I don't know, I think it's like, to be honest, I relate to it in the same way that I relate to religion now, that like I think I know my religion pretty well at this point. We talk about it all the time, but like the fact of the matter is most people know about like a fourth of what you know on any given, like, and they'll say something innocuous that most people think about, your religious beliefs or your, like, or movies, where it's like, well, movies are supposed to be entertaining, or it's like, well, Christians don't believe in evolution, right? Like, just stuff like that, like, just kind of dumb shit that exists in the ether.
Like a random comment, like, well, the Old Testament God is the bad one.
Yeah, it's that, like, it's the culturally accepted dogma of really dumb things.
And I think part of maturing is learning not to be an asshole about that. Like, that's like a really hard thing. Yeah.
It's part of maturing is understanding that people are going to learn and kind of say dumb things because they will get it from somebody who, to be honest, is probably pretty apathetic about the topic and doesn't bother to learn.
Yeah, well, and that they might not just, like, be that interested in the same thing you are. And so, like, yeah, for a lot of people, movies are just going to see the Marvel stuff, and I think that's fine, And there's always this challenge whenever you get into a subject of, like, not becoming an asshole if you want to, like, if you get deep into a subject, you know?
Yeah. And it's tough because,
most
like,
people don't care.
There's a juxtaposition between, a part of me resents that, because it's like, oh man, I'm trying to rail against the monoculture here. You should care. But, like, also I know that, like, people got other shit going on. It doesn't really matter to most people if, like, you know, Marvel movies are, like, dumb fun that everybody seems to, like, kind of generally like. I mean, I care that it's ruining the industry, but
yeah,
not some random person is gonna be like, oh, well, gotta save the film industry today and watch Citizen Kane 30 times.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's you know, most people aren't thinking through that, and that's fine, I guess, is what I guess I'm saying. But what is bad, and we'll get into with the industry, is that, like, in the background, Disney is, like, taking on a monopoly.
Yeah, you let it
film.
develop a monoculture that essentially, like, subsumes all other culture in a way that is it's not, like, the best way to describe to it is it's not organic. Like, it doesn't develop that way organically, which is probably the worst part.
Yeah. Anyway, back to your relationship with movies.
So I actually went to film school, but not an accredited film school. I have a weird relationship with film school because I actually had, like, a mentor. I'm gonna name dox him now because he is great. And if you're in New Jersey and you ever want to take, like, just adult classes centered around filmmaking, he will, if you're willing to learn and really get into it, he basically, if you've seen, Josiah has read some of my scripts. I went from, like, knowing absolutely nothing about film, like, script writing, to being a competent screenwriter. Like, I'm able to, like, type something out that looks like you might see it in, like, a spec script document made by somebody who's, like, made a film before, which is something I'm relatively proud of. But his name is Chris Messineo. He is a New Jersey-based filmmaker. He's a great guy. He's, like, one of the nicest people I've ever met. He really loves the industry. He doesn't really care about making stuff that he thinks a lot of people, like, I asked him if he ever wanted to make a feature, and he kind of just sat back and he's like, you know, I kind of like teaching more. And to be honest, if I ever made a feature, I don't know if I ever would, but I really just like teaching people how to make short films by making short films. So I make a lot of short films. So, I don't know.
That's cool.
I feel like he's chill. Like, he's more interested in getting other people to learn film and have an appreciation for film and what goes into filmmaking than, like, really just making money off of it, which I think is, now that I'm older, I was like, when I heard that for the first time, I was like, geez, how come he would make a great feature film? And now I know what actually goes into it. That
shit's hard.
Not only is it hard, but it's also, like, it might really just not go anywhere. There are so many features that just end up in, like, the recycling bin of, like, somebody's, like, how do I describe this? Like, somebody's computer. Like, they just end up on a drive somewhere in somebody's house, and they're finished, and they got submitted to competitions, and maybe one picked them up, and they just don't run the festival circuit. They maybe just ran, like, you know, maybe even if they do get picked up, then there's a possibility that no one after it will ever see it again because they might not get a physical release or theatrical release at all. So it's really a crapshoot. But he's a great guy. He basically taught me how to, on a very basic level, make a movie and write scripts. And now I'm trying to get back into screenwriting because I'm like, I haven't done this for so long and I have so many ideas and I really want to try, even if it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, and then, like, you know, I hit my 20s. I hit my early 20s, and I was like, I'm tired. Like, I worked a lot of jobs. I saved a lot of money. I bought a lot of film equipment. I think you've seen some of my portfolio work that I have on a folder in my iCloud.
Yeah.
And I was like, it was pretty okay for a film student. And I was like, man, I could really go somewhere with this. And then I just said, you know, I kind of need money to live, and I do have, as everybody knows who knows me, I've switched kind of majors. I went back to school because for years I was kind of under the impression that, like, this would be the year that I make a movie that'll go somewhere, and then I could jump off from that, and it just never happened.
Yeah. Well, you know, beyond just movies as a topic, I do kind of think it would be fun to, no, not really fun, actually. It'd probably be a sad conversation, but get into kind of this like mid-20s malaise that you and I are both in right now.
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we talked about this the other night, actually. I have like a Substack piece that I've been sitting on and off and on working on called On Burning Out. Me kind of processing this sense of like, I don't know, when you are told, if you're a mildly intelligent or artistic person, you know, people tell you growing up that you have a lot of potential, right? Mm-hmm. And then there's kind of a moment in your 20s, if you don't end up on like the track to grad school or whatever the thing is, that you're kind of faced with this, like, I have to work and I want to keep this dream alive, but life doesn't seem to point this way anymore. And like, that's a weird thing to think through, because I don't think you should let your dream die, but I also don't think you should fuck over the people in your life to make your dreams possible. You know, it's a weird point of life that I'm sure anybody listening to this that's older than us knows this feeling very well.
It sucks because it's like, I think this goes back to film in some way, but I think a lot of the film of our youth was a lot of pop movies were just about like they were very pop capitalist in a way. It was the phrasing that society is basically just a meritocracy. And this is me having sympathy for weird liberals on the internet, because I think a lot of them, I think what's weird is that I think on Mammonburg we're all like we try to be materialistic and realistic in our thinking of the world as it is. But as religious people, you know, we can't just, you know, we can't imagine that that's all there is. But you have to meet kind of the world on its own terms. And I think despite liberals being by and large more annoying about like religion, especially, I think most of them are magical thinkers in a way.
Yeah.
I think they just kind of relate to, and it's weird, like, especially with the Harry Potter shit. Like, do you remember, God, during the Trump age when there was all that stuff about, like, you know.
Yeah, Trump is Voldemort. And
it was a point of using the media we grew up with to use as a point of comparison for like real world events, which I think if you were using something that was like, you know, il conformista, like that would be great. Use the movie The Conformist to critique fascism, because it's a critique of fascism. Don't don't fucking use, you know,
YA novels
Wizard Jesus Becomes a Cop. Like, don't use that series to like critique society. That's not even what it's trying to do, but also it's not a good frame of reference, and it's not even really cogent. But I think most of the insufferable shit you see out of liberals is that they're on their face, they're magical thinkers. I remember I saw this terrible, god awful post when I was younger where it was like, you know, they told us we could be like, you know, wizards at the School of Wizarding, and, you know, and then this is what real life is like. And it's like, I think the millennial and like Gen Z, like older Gen Z, because I'm kind of like somewhere in the middle apparently. You and it's weird because Nalima's 26 and she's a millennial. And I'm technically Gen Z, but apparently I'm on the border of being a millennial. So like,
I'm 25
generational barriers
like right
are stupid, folks.
Right, yeah, right. Well, but no, what I think you're getting at, and I think I agree, is just kind of this. A lot of the media we grew up with was about like the individual chases his dreams and actualizes and becomes
individualistic the thing. And like, you will achieve greatness. And most of it was like, if you really analyze it, most of it is just kind of like implicitly kind of giving the game away. Because Harry Potter, you know, think about Harry Potter for 5 seconds. Yeah. Harry Potter is like a special rich kid who grows up to be like, he's the chosen one, because of course he is. Like, he's poor when he lives with the Dursleys, but he's secretly rich. So, you know.
Yeah, well, it's I mean, a lot of the YA novels are perfectly that. It's this belief that, like, I've got this secret thing, and people don't know this about me. People don't get me. But, you know, I'm going to get shuttled off to, you know, I'm the chosen one, and they don't realize it, and whatever. And for better or for worse, that's a mindset that I've had. a lot of my life.
To be honest, I think I feel that way too, because it's like I was supposed to do this thing that I really wanted to do, and it just ended up not happening. And they don't know that I'm destined for greatness, and that I'll finally rise above the dreck of the New Jersey suburbs, and one day I'll be king of the world.
Right, and like, you know, for me, a lot of this stuff has been academic as well. You know, I was told by people I was smart.
Now, for me, it's kind of the opposite experience, because for me, my ADHD only was useful growing up, because now I know that people consider me smart, but for a long time, I was just like a fucking, like, I thought I was an idiot. I still think I'm stupid.
I have the back and forth there too, because I do have ADD, and I didn't go to college immediately after graduating because I decided academia wasn't for me, and then I decided academia was for me, and I've
too many conservative red pills about college. Yeah, and like, no, God, they'll make me a liberal.
Yeah, they'll make me a liberal. Yeah, no, but like, you know, I went back and forth. I did this stuff, and so what comes from that is, like, you know, if you're academically minded and into theology or whatever, and you're around kind of everyday people who are not interested in that, and you can kind of be pretentious about it. You can kind of be like, I'm the guy who knows things. But once you get online and you're around people with the shared interests, you realize you've only scratched the surface of this subject, or whatever subject you're into. And then if you have built your identity around, and this is the if we get into the brain of Josiah that I'm processing now, right? And I think it's similar for a lot of people who probably are listening to this too. You are suddenly challenged with your identity. Your entire identity is getting challenged because you realize you've only scratched the surface. You are not the chosen one. And that sucks. Realizing that is not a fun feeling.
It does suck because you, Josiah W. Sutton, you, Philip Cozzi, are not destined for greatness, quote unquote. It's not that you won't ever do anything great, because that's kind of unknowable. You don't know if you'll ever... Yeah. And the standards of greatness for society are very, like, ill-formed and very loosey-goosey, and you'll never quite know if you actually have made it. It's like the Vincent van Gogh effect, where, like, after you die, that's when people will decide if you were any good or not.
Which is, by the way, the narcissistic dream. That story is perfect, because it's like, okay, people don't like my podcast now, but when I die,
Sleeper hit Mammonburg and Fruitless 80 years from now, they'll be like, wow, all the future leftist Christians will be like, these Christian shit posters, they were our forefathers.
They were on to something, which is incredibly narcissistic, but I kind of like just being really open right now about our kind of narcissism. Because everybody's really narcissistic, I feel like.
Everybody's narcissistic to some degree. And, like, I'm guilty of that, even though, like, most people consider me a very sweet and kind person. I think the culturing just encourages us to think narcissistically about our role in it anyway. Mm-hmm. And that sucks, because, like, what it does is that you have this kind of, like, you have this confliction in your brain where, you know, you're like, well, I'm not really that kind of person. I don't feel particularly narcissistic. But then when it comes to your place in society, you're like, I want to achieve something. I don't want to be like all of these people who apparently have never wanted to achieve anything in their lives. Like,
well, this was something I kind of, narcissistically going to talk about my own things I worked on, but this is a chunk of the draft of the novel I'm sitting on. This is a spiel that's in it, where one of the characters is like a young character who thinks he's going to break the chains of society and he's going to become, a real hero. And there's like a consistent theme of him looking around the small town he lives in and seeing all these burnouts, these people that became complacent and accepted suburban life. And what I was trying to point out in it, I hope it comes across, is that all of those people also felt that way then when they were his age. A lot of people have dreams. Most people do.
And it's a culture of narcissism, because it's the thing is, a lot of the media growing up is, we live in a society that tells you to follow your dreams. and then is just incredibly hostile to people who want to do what they actually want to do. That it's actually really difficult to navigate, especially if you're in the arts. Like, what you find out if you're artistically inclined at all. Like, you finally find out that you're good at filmmaking, you know, in your late teens, early 20s, that you have at least a knack for some of it. And that makes you like, oh shit, I'm good at something. That was me. That was like me finding out that I was good at something. And I was like, I'm fucking good at something. Yay! I can actually do something with my life. And then like immediately after that is then it's like you're good at something. Now you have to find a way to monetize it, which is insufferable because it's the worst of all possible situations because our society has to monetize things. So when you feel like you finally cracked the code of who you are, and that could come when you're 20 or that could come when you're 50, that you finally like found the thing you were good at, and now you found out that like society is structured in such a way that it's extremely hostile to anybody who wants to do anything other than like, you know, churn out capitalist nonsense. And it's like, ugh, great. The best of all possible scenarios, baby. And I think going back to what you said about being like a theology nerd is like most people don't go really in depth into a lot of things. And I think egotistically, we convince ourselves it's that way because people are like, naturally stupid or incurious, which I don't think is true. We think that way because we're the ones destined to succeed. But the reason is that most people don't have the time, or they have like practical things to be interested in, or like they have to survive, or they have other things to think about. Like I once got into like I once got into like an argument with a neo-pagan at my college. Not an argument, it was more like a discussion. And he kept calling, like, he said that he liked calling, like, this is the kind of person he was. He liked calling, like, Christian theology Christian mythology because it pissed people off. And he just liked getting a rise out of, like, religious people. And he was trying to tell me, I think it was this funny, that versions of the devil in Western, Western iconography, horns, goat legs, tail, that specific version of the devil was like, you know, that was based off of, his claim was that it was based off of like proto-Irish belief, like proto-Irish paganism, not even Celtic paganism, like proto-Irish paganism. Yeah. And it was a deity called the Horned God, which I think this is partially true, that there are depictions of some sort of unnamed horned god that has been lost to time. Like, it looked like a satyr, and also satyrs also influenced, so it's not, this isn't just one influence. But, so, you know, his claim was that, like, you know, this specific version of the devil, and I'm like, oh, so you're talking about the Satan, right? And he's like, what do you mean, the Satan? And I'm like, well, you know, in Christian theology, it's kind of more complicated than, like, it's a primordial force of evil, and, you know, he's not, like, because obviously I came at the angle that I was a queer Christian, and, like, he obviously had the idea that Christians can't be queer, that doesn't happen, and, you know, so then at one point I was like, well, the Satan is like a primeval, like obviously a fallen angel in Christian theology, but it's still like it's a cosmological force. It's not just like a dude out there trying to make people evil. Like it's more cosmic and primordial and like disturbing than that. And like, obviously he'd have been dealing with evangelicals who their perception of the devil is a guy who makes you gay. So, you know, it's... So he's like, oh, and then like his friend who was a trans man, he was very nice. His friend chimed in because we were talking about Christians of like other like backgrounds, and this guy grew up Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. He didn't participate in the church anymore for his own reasons, but he was actually pretty knowledgeable about Orthodoxy, and he's like, we were talking about like, he seemed kind of surprised because we were talking about like Copts and like Egyptians and like Middle Eastern Catholics and how they're kind of the origin of the religion. Like, you know, Middle Easterners are the origin of the religion, and that it's a Middle Eastern Semitic religion. He was like, oh, well, yeah, like he was getting slightly uncomfortable because like the fact that he like, you know, had to like reconcile that this was a religion started by mostly brown people and that he couldn't go for the low blows anymore kind of made him a little uncomfortable.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, because once you have and this happened, mind you, this happens to anything. Once you have more than a sophomoric understanding of anything, this happened to me in my most recent history class, because my teacher is good. I wouldn't consider her great, but I'm not sure if that's the limitations of the class or that's her actual beliefs, because the issue is that, like, it's a lot, like, she's clearly left of center, but the issue is that, like, she never defines, like, materially things like white supremacy or, like, all these, like, how they serve a function, because I think the liberal attitudes toward it are very sophomoric in that they're just kind of like a primordial evil that exists in society. And what's weird is she knows who Cornel West is. And Cornel West, if you know anything about Cornel West, he's actually even though he is a very religious man, he also uses materialist topics when, like, talking about this shit. Right. Because I got the chance to, like, sit down and see Cornel West speak, which was an honor. She brought me along. He sat back and he's like, well, I don't really like concepts like whiteness, I don't really like ideas like that because it's too abstract. It's too exists in the abstract. Then he leaned over and banged on the stage and said, you got to focus on what's here. Which was his way of, like, kind of saying you have to think about it, like, materially.
Yeah.
And, like, its material function in society. And he was trying to say that, like, whiteness is just, like, an abstract. And you can't, like, what is whiteness is just kind of, like, defined by, like, cultural forces that mean something different to everybody. And I think that's too complicated for, sadly, a bunch of community college students who have to get through a history class for a credit. But it's sad It's sad that that's too complicated because she probably, I feel that she knows that. I feel that, but the issue is that she has to boil it down to very sophomoric terms to make it palatable for, across the political spectrum, a class of people who, are like community college students taking this class so they get their history credit.
Yeah, right. You can't expect everybody to be interested in stuff to the same level. Right.
And I think the sad part about it is, especially with movies, bringing it back to our shared experience with movies and trying to pursue filmmaking, is it's very easy. It's extremely easy to feel inadequate and just stop. That was what happened really for me, is that like filmmaking, because filmmaking is hard. Filmmaking is one of the hardest things you can do, because anything could go wrong, and it's comprised of so many, like, moving parts. That you just can't, like, I think a lot of narratives in our society are like, just get up this morning and just do the thing, like, if you're working on a book, write a few lines of your book today, like that self-help, like, get up, because, like, guess what? You cannot do that with a movie. I mean, you could do it with a screenplay. You can write your screenplay like that, but once you get past the screenwriting phase, and let's say a studio doesn't accept it, and, like, nobody wants to make this thing, and you're like, I want to make this thing, you can't fucking will a movie into existence with no resources. You have to have all the equipment needed to make the film. You need to have the entire crew. You need all of the actors to be somewhat competent. You need locations, and you need capital for all of those things, and more. So much more. And then if you want to, like, and this could be like a team, like, your crew could be a team of 5 people, It could be like what they had for A Ghost Story, which was less than $200,000, an incredibly small crew. But the issue is you still need to find people, and that you might just be landlocked at that point. Like, you might not just be able to find enough people who are interested in movies in your area who pursue it because your state doesn't have, like, film infrastructure.
Right. Yeah.
And everybody who's interested in doing those things have moved to places where you actually get to do those things.
Right. And so it's not as simple as just, like, willing this art into existence. And I think the whole, like, notion that we kind of are raised with of this, like, YA novel, I'm the chosen one thing is really, really bumps up with, especially an art form like film that is communal. I don't know if it the auteurs still needed people. Like they still needed other people working. And I even academia. Okay. I'll make it can complicate this with academia because like when you think of like the great intellectuals of history, right? We're more inclined to really think about them as these like individuals that go out and they think hard and then they have these brilliant ideas. But that's like not how it plays out. And one of the biggest aspects of that we forget about is, and this is kind of related to kind of a missing chunk here, but is the domestic labor. So like, all of the great 19th century historians had wives who cooked and cleaned and ran their households. And some of the richer ones, had wives who were basically like head masters to a whole army of servants that were keeping the house running long enough that they could have the time to focus on being the next, great historian of the 19th century. And that was a team effort that just because their name is associated with it, their wife put just as much work into making that possible for them. And so the chosen one notion, it like doesn't exist. It's just that like in a lot of ways, the situation we are in the last few, decades as the feminist movement has kind of changed the dynamics of domestic labor and stuff a bit anyway, is like, I know, like no longer able to just like, I don't know, let my partner do all of the domestic work for me. And then I get to be awesome on the internet and then take the credit for that. Like,
yeah, just remember, fellas,
that dynamic has changed.
Just remember, fellas, the reason the next great film hasn't been made yet is because women demanded rights.
Because of feminism. No, that's not what I'm That is not what I'm saying. What my point is like,
I'm woefully misinterpreting you for comedic effect.
It has always been a team effort. It's that there are a lot of people that were written out of history who were part of the team that made those names that And that's the problem, like, that we come to now as, like, you and I, right, is, that we need money if we wanted to pursue some artistic passion. And I still have dishes that I don't do enough of, and I have chores that I need to do. And it's wrong. It's selfish and narcissistic to shove those things on someone else so that you can chase your dreams. And I think that's something that's that's not palatable to an individualistic mindset that we're raised in with art that we consume.
Totally. And it's so sad because like even amongst the auteurs, all the like, everybody focuses on directors so much, but like, I feel like a 16th of those know who, like, of the people who focus on directors know who, like, Roger Deakins is. And he's like the biggest cinematographer there ever was.
Yeah. Like, film is a great example, of an art form like this where, cause I think it's easier to imagine the lone, intellectual behind the novel, for instance. Although, like I'm saying, that's not really as true as it sounds. But like film, it's like it's impossible to be to really hold to a complete auteur vision when you talk about it. I mean, I think we still do it because, Scorsese has a look. You can see it, but Scorsese wouldn't be Scorsese without all the people that work with him.
Yeah, and he developed that look through the use of other people, like. He was like,
Roger Corman.
Yeah, he told the gaffers what to do. He told the cinematographer what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was always a team effort, and I don't know. I think that we have done a disservice to the arts by not talking about these as communal things. I don't know.
And I think a lot of, like, to be honest, from my personal experience, a lot of shitheads go into, like, fucking film school. I had this one guy I worked with who was also, like, interested in working in film. Like, he wanted to be a showrunner one day. And I was, like, trying to talk cameras with him, and he had no idea what I was talking about. I'm like, well, you want to be a filmmaker, right? You need to know, like, how camera specs work, or, like, what size sensor you're working with. And he's like, no, I'll just let somebody else take care of that. I want to be the showrunner. I'll just basically be the director. And I'm like, so many of these fucking guys think they'll just waltz up into, like, you know, a movie studio, and you'll never have to be, like, a grip, or you'll never have to be a gaffer, which are, like, the working class jobs in the film industry. They're the people who lug shit around. Gaffers are electricians, basically. They set up every light and make sure they don't blow or explode, and they position them each individually. And the Gaffers Union actually forbids people from tampering with the lights because something could go horribly wrong, because film sets are just highly flammable. But there are just, like, these systems in place and these kinds of people that, like, do this highly important job. I would, like I said, if one thing goes wrong on the end of a gaffer, you guess what, buddy? The set's burning down. And that, you don't want that. So, like, it's this just flagrant disregard for anything and everything. It is genuinely insufferable, I would say. It's just genuinely, like, it's this highbrow, I don't have to do anything shtick. Like, it's the, you know, I'm gonna be the guy who just spawns this out of the ether, and you don't have to worry about it too much, honey. I'll be good. I'll be super good at it, and you know. And it's, to me, it's this entitlement that kind of comes with the film school mentality. Obviously, I think that's modern film school. I don't think that's all film school, but that's definitely modern film school kind of has generated this. And I think it's genuinely very unhealthy. I think it's just kind of, I don't know. It's to me, it's genuinely concerning, because it's like, you know, you get these people who, like, you know, think they'll never have to do one of the other jobs in the film industry, and that just doesn't happen.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think that this probably plays a part in this, I don't know, individualistic, kind of narcissistic, like, sense of burning out that we're talking about in our 20s, because, you know, if you don't have the support structure to make art like you want and find a way to monetize it also, then, yeah, you're kind of just stuck, you know, either doing it because you love it or, you know, giving up on it. And, you know, I want to believe that I will push and, like, try to be a writer or whatever, even if I don't make any money, because I just like doing it. But, you know, it's a communal activity, and the belief that, you know, my brilliance is the thing that's going to do, you know, make me well known is ultimately a self-defeating thing, because, you know, I'm never going to be able to look at people like as somebody who wants to write, the impulse I should have, or get into theology or whatever, right, is when I meet people who are smarter than me, or people who are just as smart as me. Instead of feeling challenged by that, it should be to see that they're another comrade interested in this thing who I can bounce ideas off of. Because, like, you know, I wouldn't have finished that draft of a novel I wrote a year ago if it weren't for Jackal and Josh Christensen, who I talked a lot with as I was planning out that novel. I would not have written it without them. It was a communal thing, even if it was individually me writing at the end.
And I think that's important.
And if I instead, you know, you shouldn't perceive people, but it's hard not to when you're told that you're the chosen one. You know, like, it's hard not to see people who are equally or more talented than you as challengers.
And I think it's a really toxic mentality.
It's awful. Yeah, it's bad.
That's just capitalism. That's just undistilled. It's the ideas of capitalism that, instead of finding allies towards the quest of making something, you know, communitarian, like, you know, let's say you find another person who's going to be, you know, a filmmaker, and you write your script together. And at the end of the day, the movie is made, and, like, you guys end up squabbling over director's credits. At that point, it's just like, you made the movie together. Either be co-directors or just put it aside. It doesn't really matter at this point. And I think what's great about Christianity, toot my own religious horn here, folks, is that at some point you have to kind of kill that egotistical side of yourself. You know, it's the notion that a Christian should die daily, that Cornel West said during that gracious meeting I had with him. It's the notion that Christians should die daily, and that just means killing the part of yourself that is enamored with all this bullshit and, killing the self that is, self-obsessed and awful. Like, you have to let yourself die in order to bring somebody's, like, you have to sacrifice the parts of yourself that won't help others. And, then I think that's kind of why I'm happier pursuing journalism in a way, because I feel like as a journalist I'll be able to help somebody. Maybe that's also kind of in a society where journalism is becoming less and less useful. Maybe that's also kind of presumptuous, but I still believe that journalism can be a force for good in the world. So I want to do something that, and I've been thinking a lot recently about film and what it means to me. I haven't been able to sit down and watch a movie in a while without going to the theater and seeing it. Like, I have trouble. I have like a wall of Blu-rays. And the reason is because it's just, I used to do it to try to learn something from it. And now there's a part of my brain that's like, well, what are you going to get out of it?
Yeah. Well, that's, God, no, I feel that. Yeah.
And it's like, you're upset and you're like, I feel like I could do better. I see all of these people writing books that are excellent. Like, one I picked up was The Next Shift, which by Gabriel Winhart, I think, or like something like that. And the Next Shift is like just essentially about how minority women became the underclass of like health workers, like throughout the continental United States, but specifically in Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah. Gabriel Winnan. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. Yeah, he's on Know Your Enemy a couple times. Yeah.
That's where I actually heard of the book from. Yeah. So it's the best way I could say it is that, like, I admire those people because they try to make works that analyze the specific social problem, and I think that's kind of what journalism is supposed to be. And it's frustrating because, there is this part of me that's like, oh, but you'll still be a filmmaker one day, and I'm like, maybe I will, but maybe I have to kill the part of me that would be okay sacrificing everything for just to make a movie. And I think about the I kind of thought about it recently, and I kind of hated myself for thinking this, but I think it's kind of true, is movies are important, but they're not that important. And I think that's a harsh kind of lesson to learn, is that art is important, but there are things that are more important. And, I think a lot of filmmakers, especially liberal filmmakers, get it in this, this film is going to be so important. The Green Book is such an important film. And I'm like,
right.
It's not an important movie. I'm sorry. It's not an important movie. And not only are you not making it for the right reasons, I admire somebody like Tarkovsky, who is like just making films to explore religion, to explore just the nature of humanity, who is grappling with lofty philosophical ideas and doing so in a highly religious way that you don't see a lot of other filmmakers grapple with. I think the American analog is probably Scorsese and Terrence Malick, probably more so Terrence Malick, but it's people dealing with their own religious view. You don't really see that a lot anymore, and it's like films are becoming less important because less people are willing to make the important ones. They just don't care. And at some point you just have to say, well, maybe there is something better I could be. And it's not like film doesn't mean anything to me anymore. I love it. I love it to death. But it's like, I don't know, maybe this is just like a weird Christian thing, because it's like, is that what God really wants for me? Is just to like make these movies that I think are good commentaries on society. I think I have some good ideas that would be like get people to start thinking about and empathizing with other people. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but it's like, are they as important as something else I could be doing or helping somebody?
Yeah. Well, and I think for me, there's also an aspect of beyond just that, like, because, man, the comment you made about how you would watch movies to see what you could get out of them, like what you could learn from them, that like hit me hard. because that's been my engagement with so much media. And it's kind of like I didn't get much into my relationship with movies, but I'm kind of like a late bloomer cinephile, because I just, with a combination of life and lack of interest throughout my life, I didn't really get into movies and thinking about film much until like the last couple years. Which is rare. I feel like when people become like a cinephile, it's like when they're 15, and then by the time they're my age, they're not like, seeing Citizen Kane for the first time. So I always feel like a remedial kind of whatever. But what I've noticed as I've been watching a lot more movies is I'm getting this itch, like, oh, maybe I should be a filmmaker. And it's like, I can't fucking just engage with something and find beauty in it without having to find a way to make it be the thing, my new thing.
I've had that before.
That this is, because I remember the same feeling of like, musician. It was the longest time I was going to be a musician, and I had this sense like, whenever I listened to a new genre that I really liked, it's like, could I do something with this? Could I experiment with this? And there's an aspect of that's good art, but the, artistic drive. But like, a part of it is like, it's like, I can't find something good that's not me. I have to find a way to make it me. I have to find a way that I can...
something that's like self-defining all the time,
Yes. That's bad.
I know, but that's how a lot of people absorb things, and I can relate, because it's like, it's like when people like something, they're like, well, how do I make this me? How do I essentially inject something into this thing? And it's sad because it's sad because I think, I don't know, film is important to me, and I wanted to be a filmmaker from a very young age. I remember, I don't know, I think we overly pathologize sometimes these aspects of ourselves, but I remember when I was a kid, I had, my uncle bought me one of those like shitty cameras, like digital cameras, early advent digital cameras, got like 5 megapixels, grainy shit. And I remember my fascination with turning it to the movie section and just making what were the equivalent of kid movies, like the equivalent of like a kid in the 80s, like with a super 8mm camera with no idea how to make a movie, just like mimicking what you think a movie should be made like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's a formative memory for me. And, I from an early age of, like, I don't know, I think we get these lofty goals where it's like, I think from a certain kind of Protestantism, it's like, this is what I was made to do. And then you think about it.
It's vocation, yeah.
Yeah, you think about it, and you're like, does God really want me? Like, I think God gives us things that we're good at, and I do think he gives us things that we love. But, like, are we made to make those things define us? I'm not so sure. I'm not sure that we're supposed to be defined by the things that we do for money or our interests and passions. I don't think those are supposed to define us in that way. I think God, since God is essentially a being of love, I think he delights in giving us things that we love, like, obviously. But I don't think, maybe because the presumptuous part is that, when you find this thing, you want to make it yours almost exclusively, this is my thing. You can't take this away from me. You don't know how, it's the Willem Dafoe in Spider-Man. It's like, you can't do this to me. You know how much I've sacrificed? It's but it's like, but it's that, but like real. It's that protectiveness we have for the things that we think are ours. We think that like, oh, you can't take away my love for, like, it's that feeling that you don't want that stolen from you. But in reality, sometimes you have to sacrifice that thing because, well, some things are more important. And, it's okay to love it, but you don't have to subsume it into yourself, and you don't have to be particularly good at it if you want to do it. Because you'll either A, get better if you pursue it, or B, you just love it, and that's okay. I don't know.
Yeah. There's something to just, I think, that I feel that, at least in me, and I do think that this is true about a lot of people, but maybe not all, I don't know. There is we have a hard time appreciating beauty without the desire to be the one creating it. Like, and that's bad, because you should be able to listen to the, music without the desire to be the one playing the guitar, right? But I think that's always been, that's a thing I've been thinking through quite a bit lately, as like a ultimate character flaw that doesn't seem nefarious, but can become nefarious. Well,
you know what it is?
I think and I, like I think we've been saying is maybe it doesn't manifest this way to most people or everybody, but I do believe we live in a narcissistic cultures where the kind of pathology we've been exploring throughout this episode is something I think a lot of people listening to this probably have some variation of.
Yeah, I think anybody can relate to it.
Yeah, and I think that the hardest challenge is to die to yourself and to learn to see beauty in the world, and not try to own the beauty, not try to be the thing that creates the beauty, but to just appreciate.
I think one thing that has been immensely helpful to me to kind of like come to terms with this, to try to like be better, I don't know, it's well, first off, obviously my religion, but also taking up photography. Because it might sound a little weird, but it's the fact that I've taken up photography has helped me, because photography can, it's a solo art. You're a photographer, you can just take pictures of the world around you, and if you've seen some of the photos, I think I'm a pretty good photographer. And I like appreciating I think photography is the art of appreciating the beauty of other things and trying to capture it in its purest form. And filmmaking is like that too, but it's more complicated. It's not just trying to capture beauty. It's trying to capture a lot of different things. And it's not that photography can't be the same way, but photography is more simple because it's oriented around a more kind of like less explicit appreciation of beauty. It's not trying to say anything because there are no actors who are speaking to the cameras, so it's not trying to say anything in that regard. It's trying to comment just by capturing the image of something, which could be the image of something ugly, or the image of like something terrible, or the image of something beautiful. And I think helping to appreciate what's around, I think really is, for me, it's got to be just photography, because going around and learning to appreciate this stuff, it helps. It helps you become a little less selfish. It lets you appreciate something communal that can be viewed by multiple different people. Like, there was this guy that I ran into another photographer while I was taking photos of Asbury Park. He had a vintage lens on his camera, and we got to talking. And we were talking about cameras, and he's like, well, your camera's better. You've got the Fuji, so you've got better colors. And I'm like, oh, no, Sony's got some pretty nice stuff. And it was nice to just see somebody else who was there, like, doing the same thing that I was doing. It didn't feel so lonely, like I was the only person walking around with a camera being weird and taking photos of everything and taking photos of people without them ever knowing. But it makes you feel a little less selfish and like something more appreciative, because it's like, I'm not alone in this, and there are people out here trying to do the same thing as me, and this isn't just mine. We're all trying to capture our own little bit of beauty. And I think what's tough is that, you want to make this thing, you want to make it your whole life. Because, like, when I was younger, I wanted to make filmmaking my whole life. I really did. I wanted to dedicate, as much time to it as possible. And then, I got older, and and then I fell in love, and I'm getting married soon. And I said to myself, I'm never going to put Nalima through instances of this where I'm not home until 3 a.m. and my kids never see me because I'm on a film set all the time. And, you know, there are times when I'm not on a film set, but, you know, it's like Sindeki, New York. Am I gonna dedicate myself to this thing, you know, so much that my kids don't even know who I am, that my wife never sees me, and that I just let the little gifts that I've received outside of any sort of vocation, I let that stuff just pass me by, and I don't think I want to.
Yeah, well, yeah, everything you've said here has really clicked with me, and I think we're moving toward a really good kind of conclusion. But what you said brought two things to my mind. One first was, I think an example to me that really clicked the narcissism of being an artist kind of stuff into focus and really got me thinking about this a long time ago. How do I do this without doxing? Because I don't want to dox people. Somebody I know's dad ruined their family's life because he was an accountant, and he had a pretty well-paying job and had a family and stuff like that, and decided that he was going to be a photographer. And he went back to school to be a photographer, and forced the wife to have to work 3 jobs and do all the, you know, everything to keep things running while he went off and chased his dreams and fucked his family over. And that has always been a thing of like, I don't ever want to do that to someone else. You know, I never want to, I saw the negative side of chasing this passion. And then I wanted to give another example that's the opposite of exactly describing what we're talking about, and it's the same photography as well, which is my good friend Kip Paulson, who
you've mentioned Kip before.
Yeah, you've seen some of his work, and I've been meaning to probably get him back on Fruitless. He was on VLVC back in the day talking about photography. He's really into street photography, and I know him because he was a coworker at the coffee shop that I worked at, and he's a mailman now. And, he has very much accepted that it's photography is not going to be a job for him. He's not going to chase it as a career, but it is primarily about seeing the beauty in the world for him. And I lived with him during a pretty rough period of my life and had a lot of interesting conversations. And I hold him responsible for me trying to get back into getting into film kind of late in my life, watching a lot of movies and stuff. And then to taking photography kind of, thing for him was just, he's like, this can be as simple as just taking pictures with your phone, but just, it makes you pay attention to the world. And it makes you, kind of takes you out of yourself. And so for him, he takes a lot of pictures and he's no desire to monetize them. He's
hard.
Done one art show before, but it is just purely out of his own creative enjoyment.
You know how hard it is to just monetize photos? I mean, I follow a lot of photographers whose work I really, really like, and it's insufferable because it's just like, now it's NFTs. Now it's selling like photography NFTs.
Well,
and
right.
It's like,
and even if you're not going to take it that big, I don't remember if he used to do it, but he doesn't do it anymore. He's like, he doesn't take, it's mostly senior photos, weddings, stuff like that. That's how you end up being a photographer that makes money. And, he just doesn't like shooting those things.
Yeah, because it's boring. You're doing like portraits of people, basically.
Not that, of course, there are people who find passion in doing that. And man, lucky you, if you like taking wedding photos, you could actually make some money doing that. But, he just takes pictures because he likes it. And it was he has this relationship to art that I have always admired about him a lot. And that is something I'm trying to get better at, is just not needing to be the chosen one. I think that's the theme that's stuck in my brain, because it's like, I don't know, it's a funny way of putting something that's going on in a lot of people's head, is like that narcissistic YA brain that I think so many of us have, that we're a wizard, Harry,
No, totally. It's the idea that you are destined for greatness and everybody else isn't.
They're all not magical like you, but But no, and part of, I think, good art is making you realize that others around you also have something worthwhile. I don't know.
Well, I think that's very, I hate to say it, I feel like realizing the goodness and divinity of people on their own is kind of a Christian mission. You know, it's, you know, even though, because I always hate when people say that original sin means we're evil. It means that obviously it's a Christian belief that we're all capable of sin and destruction, that becomes like intertwined with our nature where it wasn't before. But it doesn't mean we're fundamentally evil. It usually means that a lot of our intentions can end up being bad without us even noticing it. Stuff like that. Like almost what we're saying with art, that you can kind of become a selfish dick without even realizing it because, you know, it's something naturally selfish. You know, like it often means that our impulses, our desires are often worse than they are good. But I think it's part of Christianity also to just recognize the divinity and the image of Christ in another person. And instead of saying, I'm better than you, you know, the Better Call Saul, I'm better than you. You'll always be slipping Jimmy. You know, it's, instead of that, it's you looking at another person and you're saying, God, well, you're in this too, huh? You've got dreams and hopes and loves like I do, and you've been here before, and I don't know. I you know where I felt this recently? I was sitting in class, and we were watching a bit about a Ken Burns documentary where he was talking about this important like Holocaust documentary, and well, we didn't try to relate it to modern times and the rise, like basically the implication that like the rise of something could be learned from the rise of the Nazis and the Holocaust compared to like fascism in the West, which I don't think is wrong, but I think people are kind of duping themselves to not recognize, this is just a side thing, to just not like, I don't know, I think there's a liberal fascination with everything kind of coming back to that when it comes to fascism, when like fascism can evolve and be its own thing, which is equally terrible but also separate from the Nazis. That's its own problem, but that's its own issue. But for me, he referenced Ecclesiastes because he was talking about how history never repeats itself, but humans often remain the same. And it's the Ecclesiastes, you know, line 9, what has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun.
New under the sun, yep.
And what's interesting is that I think in talking to you and like, you know, feeling this, you know, this mid-20s malaise and sharing it together and talking about it together, it brings me back to that verse, because it's there, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. When you start to realize that somebody else feels this way and you're not the king of the world, who only your feelings can be felt as good by you, and there is no one else who could possibly understand. There is somebody else who understands, and there's somebody who's at the same road as you, and they might take the same exact direction, because there's nothing new under the sun, and you're not the most important person who ever lived, and you're not the least important person who ever lived. You know, because the truth of the matter is, in Christianity, we are all loved by our Creator, no matter what we've done or who we are. And that's to people who are egotistical and want to be special and above everyone else, that sucks to them, because they're like, well, I don't want to be loved like everybody else. I want to be the one who is better than everyone else. But to those of us feeling the way Josiah and I do now, it's liberating, because it's that Christian feeling of, you know, God died for me, God is there for me, God suffered for me. And he loves me just as much as he loves everyone else. So there is no one on this earth I can feel superior to, and there's no one on this earth that I can diminish, because if they are loved as much as me, then who am I to treat them any worse?
Yeah.
And I think it's humbling to think of it that way. You get to a better place if you just realize that you're not special while simultaneously being incredibly special.
I think that's a good place to wrap this up. This has been a good conversation. I didn't expect it to go this direction coming on talking about movies, but in a way I'm kind of not surprised at all because you know, I think there's something interesting talking about the concept of having a passion when I bring you on to talk about your passion.
Yeah, because it's rough because it's the problem with having passions is that they never go away. You know, even though I'm not pursuing film anymore, it's not like I'm just like it's not like I'm like reformed now. It's like I've realized that the folly of my ways. It's why I took up photography, because it's like it's basically filmmaking, but 1 frame per second.
Yeah, but yeah, that's exactly it though, because I think this is part of the process of learning to enjoy a format or an art for its own sake. Enjoy it even if you're not creating it, and then to create without the notion that you need to be the most important figure. So on all that note, Phil, why don't you quickly plug yourself? Where can people find you and all that?
Oh, now the
stuff,
narcissism comes back. Up. Yes, I'm now narcissistic again. You can find me at Cryptid Director on Twitter.com, where I post about. I might start a photography Twitter. That might be a good idea.
That might be fun.
Yeah.
Or Instagram.
Oh God, I hate Instagram. Just fucking hate it
too.
I hate Instagram.
I post pictures on it though.
I know you do because I follow you on Instagram.
Yeah, I don't scroll Instagram though because it's a miserable scrolling experience. There's like 50 ads.
Folks,
anyway,
to finish out this episode, this is like. What's funny is that this is actually just like a conversation between Josiah and I. I know we say that, but there's kind of like there's no heightened podcast reality here, because like Josiah and I have gotten instances, because I don't know if you all know this, we're friends in real life. We might live states away, but we talk pretty regularly. So we'll just be like fucking feeling like shit one night, or I'm working at Panera Bread and I'll just be like, man, Josiah, you ever fucking feel a certain way? And he's just like, fuck yeah, dude, I felt that way. I feel so shit right now. And then we're this is
why it felt like a nice way to bring myself back to making some more Fruitless, because this if the Craig bot wasn't in this Discord call right now, this would probably not have been any different of a conversation.
No, it would have been the same exact conversation, which I think is actually a good thing.
I think so too. But I because this is a podcast, we should officially say thank you everybody for listening.
Is there a specific Fruitless thing you say when like ending the episode? Is it like
no?
I'll see you fruity next time, or I hope this podcast bears fruit. See you next time.
Those are good. I should start saying those. Usually I just say bye.
You gotta make like a thing where it's like,
I need something
go
better,
out and bear fruit, or like, I don't know.
That's
fucking
good.
Like,
I should start just doing like closing out things like from the Book of Common Prayer. Go out to serve and love the Lord. Okay, bye. Thanks for listening.
Bye. Thanks for listening.